We are presenting before you uh, the Northeast really, which where we are working on community conserved areas. We have a very learned person, Pia Sethi, who will be telling us more about what kind of introduce the subject to all of us. Uh, so I would like to invite Pia Sethi, who is the moderator for this session. Please take the chair. Thank you. Then next I would like to invite Mr. Herang Lungalung from Nagaland. He is the chairman of state level forum, Nagaland Community Conserved Areas Forums. They've been doing great work in Nagaland. Next I would like to request Mr. Arnab Bose, who is from Assam, and please come to the dais. He has been working with the communities in the fringe areas of Manas National Park and doing wonderful work. Next, I would like to invite Mayalmit Lepcha. She is a social activist from Sikkim. Please come to the dais. And finally, Mr. Amba Jamir, please. He is an authority in Nagaland. He has been working for so many years with the communities for conserving the community conserved areas. So thank you. With this, I would like to hand over the session to Pia Sethi. All over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. Good morning, everyone. Well, it's almost afternoon. It was supposed to start at 11:45, but we're starting late. So good morning or good afternoon, everyone. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to today's panel discussion on community conserved areas, a commoning movement. Just a brief introduction. I'm Pia Sethi, and I'm actually an ecologist by profession. My PhD was on plant-animal interactions. But during that time, I went to Arunachal, and I got a chance to listen and work with the local communities and to understand how traditional knowledge actually impacts to a great deal, not only how species are conserved, but also in terms of maintaining forest resilience and the whole ecosystem as a whole. Later, I was lucky that my work took me to Nagaland, and over a decade there, I've been working with the Tizza Valley Biodiversity Conservation and Livelihood Network. It's actually a group of individual community conserved areas which got together. They formed what's called a joint CCA, a joint community conserved areas. And during that process, I was able to document and help them actually and work with them, and they actually requested us to come there. So it was on their behest that we went to work in those areas, documenting some of the biocultural heritage, trying to support ecotourism, which was very niche-based. It was bird and butterfly tourism in the areas, and also documenting community conserved areas in Nagaland as a whole. So it was a real privilege for me to spend a decade working there. And that's when my whole perspectives on ecology shifted quite a bit, because I had this very traditional viewpoint that you needed to protect our birds, our biodiversity, our fauna. You needed to understand interactions. And that's when a rather belated eureka moment occurred, when I realized it was just not possible without communities, and that they actually had the first right there on management and on conservation. Now, I don't know how many of you are actually familiar with community conserved areas, so I'll just give you a brief of what they are and how they operate and what this session is about. Community conserved areas, as the name suggests, are areas which communities set aside voluntarily for the protection of biodiversity, for ecosystem services, for cultural or religious values, or it could just be because habitats are being degraded, species are declining. And so there are myriad reasons for why this is happening. And all of you know that in India we have a rich tradition of conservation and community stewardship. And we just look at the number of sacred groves across the country. There are innumerable sacred groves. There are river sanctuaries. In Rajasthan, you have almost 2,500 orans which are present. But I will be taking you to the Northeast because most of the distinguished panel here are from the Northeast. And when I was at my previous organization, we documented or tried to document the number of community conserved areas in Nagaland. And we were amazed to find that almost a third of the villages had created these CCAs. These are completely organically evolved, self-initiated, community conserved efforts and initiatives. And actually in the Northeast, there's a slightly different, a very particular land governance system. Of course, it's very variable, and to actually classify and paint everything with the same brush is not correct. But the Indian Constitution provides a number of provisions which have actually enabled community conservation to flourish. It's a sixth schedule of the Constitution and the Article 371A series, which by and large recognizes customary and traditional rights of communities, supports their land governance system, which is why you'll find in a number of the states, many of these community conserved areas, unlike the rest of the country, are actually on private or communal lands, communally owned lands, because their land governance, their land ownership patterns are protected. So that sounds really wonderful. I mean, they have been able to evolve, and they're able to structure themselves in the way they want. So for example, they may decide to set up a community conserved area just to protect a particular species, one species, or they might decide to protect the ecosystem as a whole, or just to have seasonal bans on hunting. So it's very, very driven by what the local community need, their needs and their perceptions. But the problem is, and there are lots of obstacles to implementation, a lot of hurdles, and the panel will be able to go into the nitty-gritties of what's happening with community conservation in the northeast of India. But very often one finds that because everything tends to be very top-down and driven by others, a lot of the programs which are actually happening, these community conserved areas have been stymied in many ways. And there's actually no policy or no narrative which actually recognizes community stewardship per se, or community conserved areas in the country. Now, it's true that the legal space after the 2000s has become much more open to community conservation. The Wildlife Protection Act was amended to include two new categories of protected areas: community reserves and conservation reserves. Now, community reserves were on private and communally owned land, and conservation reserves were on government land. Similarly, the Biodiversity Act allowed for biodiversity heritage sites. And foremost, of course, was the Forest Rights Act, which had the really, really path-breaking community forest resource provision. But what one has found over the years is that implementation, as often happens, has not been the way it really it could take place. And as I mentioned before, a lot of activities are top-down. A lot of the conservation reserves, a lot of the community reserves, in some ways, they're functionally indistinguishable from sanctuaries. A lot of the rights have been taken away. They're driven by other frameworks and narratives, and very often the Forest Department plays an important role in influencing how they actually function. So these are some of the issues. The other thing is in terms of financial support. I mean, these are organically created, self-initiated, community conserved areas, and they really strive to have funds. Eventually, once they're well established, social enterprises can play a role and play a really important part. But initially, they need the support, the technical and the financial support. And this often doesn't happen. Funding is very sporadic, it's piecemeal. What's interesting, and I'm sure some of the panelists will talk about it in more detail, is that funds are actually used, they're sort of leveraged to encourage communities to convert their informal community conserved areas into more formalized community reserves under the Wildlife Protection Act. And those are protected areas. Although the land continues to remain with the communities, they need to approach the state if they want any changes in the land use. The other thing is, and I'm sure Mayalmit and some of the other panelists will actually go into more detail, is that there's a lot of insecurity. Very often community stewardship is happening, but then these areas are actually, they're diverted for dams, they're diverted for sanctuaries, and for various other development projects. So all this work, all this effort can come to naught, and communities, instead of building up conservation, they have to start becoming activists and working to protect their lands. So a lot of issues, and we have a wonderful panel here of community representatives from across the Northeast who will give you more of the perspectives from the ground. So let me just introduce the panel very briefly. In alphabetical order, we have Mr. Amba Jamir. Now, when I asked him for some background on his expertise, he very humbly, very modestly said, I'm a development and policy strategist. But what very few people know is that Amba was actually trained as an environmental lawyer. He has more than 2 decades of experience in this sector. He's worked with NGOs, he's worked with policymakers, he's worked most importantly with communities. And he's currently the founding member of the Sustainable Development Forum of Nagaland and the Integrated Mountain Initiative. The next speaker is Mr. Arnab Bose. He's the founder member of Nature's Foster and also the coordinator of a Golden Langur project in Assam. Now, last year I was at this workshop where Mr. Bose, Arnab, actually gave a presentation on his work over the last 27 years for Golden Langur conservation. And during this period, the population of Golden Langurs has escalated from about 100 to 500. The canopy cover of the forests has gone from a mere 10% to 70%. And you know how much this entire thing cost over 27 years? Just 8 lakhs. So I was completely blown away by how, if you're dedicated, how if you work at the grassroots, you don't need a huge amount of money to really make a massive difference on the ground. The next speaker who I'll be introducing is Mr. Herring Langalang. Mr. Herring is the chairperson, the chairman of the Nagaland Community Conserved Areas Forum. I often approach him whenever I have any discussion about community conservation in Nagaland. And he has played an instrumental role in bringing all the different community conserved areas of Nagaland, the CCAs, onto a common platform, networking them, coordinating them. And he's really done amazing work, and he's very pivotal to supporting and federating community conserved areas in Nagaland. And last but not least, we have Ms. Mayalmit Lepcha. Mayalmit is a human rights advocate. She has worked tirelessly over decades for the rights of riverine communities to protect the Teesta River, as well as against some of the most destructive hydroelectric projects which are actually threatening community conservation in those areas. So a very, very distinguished panel, and I welcome you here, and thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to change the structure of this panel a little bit. We'll have 1 or 2 or maybe 3 rounds, but we'll go across and we can, for example, speak in this direction and then reverse it for the next round. And I'll be asking questions, the same question to the panel, because we have so many different perspectives on these issues, it would be important to understand them. And 2 of the themes of this panel is understanding the mechanisms to improve the global narrative surrounding surrounding community conserved areas and their role in conservation. We've heard of community conserved areas, but people don't really give them the space which is required. So how do we actually strengthen this narrative? And the second is in terms of recognizing appropriately and adequately these community conserved initiatives, community stewardship within the formal governance framework. So without any further ado, I will go on to my first question. Can you hear me? So the first relates to the narrative surrounding community conservation in your particular areas, in your region. How do you think that these community initiatives have supported biodiversity conservation, contributed to community governance issues, and provided ecological security in your areas? And do you face any impediments or any issues in terms of managing your community conserved areas? And how do you think we can strengthen the narrative of community conservation? Because that's really important, not only locally, but also within India and internationally. And what are your worldviews and narratives on community conservation which you think need to be shared and which people need to understand and make it and integrate it into a larger model within the larger understanding of conservation within the country? So we can start with you, Arnab, and then we'll go across.
Namaste and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to FES and all the collaborating organization. I'm privileged to be here. It's not because of my activity, it is because of the community I'm here. So my journey begins when I was student. In 1995, we had a bird-watching field trip in Kakoijana Reserve Forest. So Kakoijana Reserve Forest is in western Assam. It's a small area, about 17 square kilometer. And the forest is isolated, fragmented habitat. It's roughly about 30 kilometers from mainland Manas. In that visit, we came across golden langur. Till then, there was no official record of the presence of golden langur there. And the habitat was degraded. Less than 10% canopy coverage was there. Then when we came across golden langur, then we communicated with the organizations who are actually working for the conservation of primates, Indo-US primate project. Then they have confirmed that the species is golden langur. Then we started our activity for the conservation of golden langur. Then we started going to the community, talk with the community. And at the same time, we approached to the then minister, Forest Minister Assam, and we submitted one memorandum to declare that area as wildlife sanctuary. Very soon, we realized that that concept of building an area as wildlife sanctuary was not correct. And then we didn't approach anymore for pursuing this as to declare the area as sanctuary. Then we started working with the community, and very soon we realized that the people with whom we were we were discussing, mostly they are very poor, but they know the importance of the ecology, ecosystem, although they are illiterate. They know the importance of trees. But I remember during that time, they used to tell us, please complete the meeting quickly. Then we asked them why. They told us, no, we have to go to town to sell our firewoods. So that was the harsh reality. Then it's a story about 27 years, almost 27, 28 years. It's very difficult to tell everything within very short span of time. And during this time, we faced lots of problem from the local, timber mafia, bureaucrats, different agencies who were tried to, take the credibility. So ultimately, we continue our activity. Then gradually we start getting result. And now the habitat, the golden langur habitat, the forest canopy increased from less than 10% to more than 70%, and golden langur population increased from less than 100 to around 600. So this is all about the animal species. So we thought our prime target is to conserve the habitat, and golden langur is the flagship species. So by saving the habitat, we are not actually saving the golden langur. At the same time, we are saving different species and birds and everything, streams. And as a result, the streams which are coming from the hills going to the paddy land were dried ones. Now it start flowing again, and all the 34 villages surrounding the habitat, they start conserving the habitat as well as the golden langur. Now, after getting the result, now everyone wants to jump into this, starting from the corporate tourism sector to DC, DFO, everyone. So they are now trying to declare this area as wildlife sanctuary. So again, this is a problem for us. So ultimately, because of their activity, in 2022, the governor has declared the preliminary declaration. He released the preliminary declaration to declare this as wildlife sanctuary. Then we stood against this concept, and we said no. We are not against the conservation. We are for the conservation, but the process should be different. So we use the Forest Rights Act. We told them to declare this area as CFR so as to involve the local community. So I'd like to stop here. Then in next round, I'll do. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. To talk about my context, like I'm from Sikkim and I'm born in Zongu. This Zongu is a valley which is a indigenous. It's a It's been protected under the Indian Constitution. I'm just giving the brief of the background of where, like, the work that we do. And to just enter in Zongu, like anyone or even a Lipcha indigenous community out apart from Zongu, they have to take a special permit to enter Zongu. And even for tourists also, because we have started homestay, if they have to come to my region, they have to take a special permit from the district authority. So just above Zongu region, we have a Kanchenjunga National Park, which was declared by the UNESCO in 2016. And we have a rich biodiversity reserve. And within this Zongu, we have a notification 3069 which permits people from entering or buying land or settle there. Only indigenous community stays there. So this is a small background. And even in 2018, the state government, Sikkim state government, have given another notification like Zongu indigenous habitat. Under habitat, like the indigenous community can do fishing, like hunting and everything. So in such a beautiful law which has been framed by the government, now we have been threatened by coming of two major dams. Like one is like 520 mega dams, which has been proposed by NSPC, and other one is Panang, which is of 320 megawatts, which by one of the private companies. So with this threat, I was in first year college doing my BCom honors, and when I reached second year, I had to drop my regular college to start my movement with the organization with the affected citizen of Tista. Right now, I'm a general secretary. We have started a movement of for 915 days to reject the proposal from the government. So with that, we could. There was six proposal in the region, and 4 was inside the Kanchenjunga National Park, the 4 hydropower project. So with that, we sat for hunger strike for 915 days, and 2 of my brothers nearly died. They were hospitalized, and they were indefinite hunger strike. We are going to the community and mobilization, and coming back and sitting for the relay hunger strike. So with that pressure, we could scrap 4 hydropower project inside the national park. So, but now the problem that we are facing is 2 hydropower project, which is in Upper Zongu and Lower Zongu, which is going to, if it comes, it's like entire the community, the forest, the conservation area, everything is going to wiped out. Because the climate change that is happening in Sikkim and all over the world. And I just want to share that, yes, 4th of October 2023, we had a massive disaster. South Lonak Lake glacier it got burst, and 1200 megawatts. This 1200 megawatts is above our region. So we had filed a PIL in long time in 2009, and we have raised this concern about glacier lake outbursts, and they have taken the forest, didn't consider the wildlife and everything with money and with the government, and we didn't had any opposition in the assembly to speak for us and support our movement. So it continued, and this is what happened. Right now, the condition is so bad that it's been 9 months that happened. People haven't got proper compensation, rehabilitation, resettlement. The problem here is it's not just indigenous community. We are concerned and all, but we should understand that River Tista is a transboundary river. We share our river with the West Bengal and Bangladesh, and it is even responsible for the lower region to, whenever such the policies that is implemented by the government, they should also raise such issues. But in Sikkim, I feel very, very sad and very we are in minority. They feel that our issues, when we started the movement of hunger strike, rally, we were jailed and we were beaten up. We were, a lot of things we have gone through. But they think that this issue is only Zongu people. Zongu people will suffer. But whatever happened last year, and it's every year it's happening. We are having flash floods and landslides, So these are the things that is overall the issues that is happening in Sikkim. Plus, we have 58 pharmaceutical companies which has been built along the rivers. And nobody, not a single person there is raising a concern. So the chemicals, the waste chemical that is coming, they're flowing to the rivers, nobody is concerned. And other thing is like the issues that is coming up Sikkim is the Savok to Rangpo the train that is coming up, and that train is coming up. They have finished digging the tunnel. They're coming by making 14 such big tunnels. We have been we have been so much burdened, but people haven't understood the longer impact. And recently they were saying that it's going to go beyond that to the border, to the China border, and that too with the tunneling. So just see impact on the not only in Zongo area, but overall in Sikkim, it's going to impact everything. So the world views the message that what we wanted to, as an indigenous community, what we want to say is like, it is so important to share our perspective, our indigenous perspective, to the outside world, to the policymakers, to the government, because whatever the indigenous knowledge we have, it's oral histories that we have. It's with from the grandparents to the great grandparents to grandparents. But what we have realized all through this movement, it's very important to have our history, our knowledge to be documented in hard copies or any kind of form, so that we can tell or we can share outside world. The mountain that they see in the form of dollars, it is our deities. It is our identity. It is our culture. The river which they see and wants to generate electricity is like the river Rongyong, one of the tributaries of River Tista, which flows from Upper Zongo. It's like we have so much strong belief that after we die, our soul travels back from that river to the foothills of Mount Kanchenjunga, where our soul rest. We as indigenous community, as Lepcha, we don't believe in heaven and hell. We believe that after we die, our soul has to go back, and our shamans, the priests and priestess, they take after we die. That are the rituals that we have. And the rituals, the other rituals is like, we have different rituals. So the rituals that we have is like, the shamans, any kind of rituals they have to do is, we have to have a fish and the birds, which has to be from the region. Otherwise, not from Bengal or from other places. We cannot use fishes, we get fish in the market, but when it reaches, we cannot use that. We have to have the local found in species of bird and thing. So we have so much, but this is not there in any of the. It's not been taught in any of the in schools, in subject any. So it is very important to have our own indigenous philosophy in the school, so that our people, because we've been taught Indian history, world history, but we never taught our indigenous owned knowledge. So these are the things that is very important. So what we did through the and we got very through this journey of 17 years. We started conservation is like, we don't have to do conservation at all in my region, because it's already there. We haven't destroyed anything, because we know, because we go to the, one of my sir yesterday from Nagaland, he said that to go to the forest, we also believe that we don't shout in the forest. We are very, very, if you shout, they will get sick. There is a deep belief we have. So when we go for trekking also, we have to be certain, we have to have our own rules that have to follow. We cannot shout, we cannot put our lake inside the pond, lake inside the lakes, and we cannot bring something from that one of the landscapes. And one of the very I'll just take 2 minutes while this working out. Then I was we have a different clans. Like Lepcha, we have a different clans. Each clans, the origin stories some are from lake, some are from streams, some are from rivers, some are from mountains, some are from caves. So each have their own origin stories. So what we did is a lot of I said, indigenous knowledge are it's been it's dying. So with that thought, we'll bring, and knowledge is with the old people in the village. So younger generation going out in search of job and studies. So there's a lot of gap between the indigenous knowledge, so in my community. So to bring that gap together, what we got is we had this Lepcha clan workshop, which of 6 months. So for the initial 3 days, we gave a training of how to collect. So we got from older generation and younger generation. So we did some workshop. So what we did was uh, we asked them to collect their own origin stories, different clans to two pairs. So they got the stories. In the training, we taught them how to do grassroots comics. So these days, nobody wants to read long, because they are beautiful long stories. But to make a friendly, student friendly, we made this stories, and that stories we converted to grassroots comics. So even like just it'll not take much time. Also, it's just take 5-10 minutes to read one story. So in that story, if we cannot read and write, like for people, we have made a scanner. We can just take a scanner in the mobile, and you can hear the audios. So what we have done. This is kind of work, like what we did, like this. These are the things. So stories that have come from different clans. So, and this is the, like we have taught. We give the detail of the participants also. What I wanted to say that this is, in Sikkim also we are being put an allegation saying that the Lipcha community, the indigenous community coming from Japan or from South Asian countries, So they add some allegation there. But I was when I didn't realize also these powerful stories was coming from the community. So I said we had a media coming, we had an awareness, exhibition, and I told through the media, saying these are the stories, like we are not been anywhere from Japan or South Asian countries. We are from the mountains, which is from this ecology and this landscape. It's there. Nobody has made up. Everybody, there's a what you call. There's a mountain there. Really, we like every river is there. Every name, all the names are in Lepcha. So these are very important. These are very important stories that we have to tell the international financing agencies and the policy makers, that it's not just in terms of, we cannot sell our origin stories, our origin and our identity, and we don't have any, how you can compensate our stories and our origins and our rituals. So these are the very concern that I wanted to share with you all. So this is, I'll just come back.
And I'll have a lot of follow-up questions for you a little later. Now, Mr. Amba Jamir, if you could give us your thoughts on, how you can strengthen the narrative around community conservation.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Amba. As you can see, I belong to the Ao Naga tribe from Nagaland. And so while I'll be speaking about the generic perspectives in terms of examples, it might just come down, you might see me talking a little bit more about my perspective. But first thing is, when we say community is not as simple as it is explained in the English language. It's like an onion that has to be peeled and peeled and peeled and peeled, because within communities you have communities and communities. So there are different layers. Each of these communities have different governance systems and governance institutions. And so when you say community conserved areas, do not think it's only the community as a village that is conserving an area. It can be a kinship group, it could be a family group, it could be an individual group, or groups of people that have come together to conserve. So again, community conserved area is not necessarily something that a village as a community gets together and do alone. When we say community conserved areas, it's not necessarily always a forest. It could be a niche area where we get the best of mushrooms. It's a microhabitat. And the community really wants to ensure that we get the mushrooms from this area throughout the year or throughout the seasons, because that's the best place for us to get it. And the community as a whole gets in touch with the landowners and say, you have to conserve this for us all. We will ensure that it's well protected and is protected. Or we have certain areas where we get certain types of flower. Let's say the mistletoe is like a mistletoe that comes out during Christmas. A lot of people come to harvest that. So that again becomes another form of community conserved area. So again, when we say community conserved area, it's not just the forests or the village, Gram Panchayat sitting together and deciding. It's at different stratas and different levels. Community conservation has always been a very, very historical activity. Much before the British's perspective or the Western perspective of conservation, or in terms of whatever forms of conservation. Communities have always ensured that they conserve. How conservation comes is again different. In some cases, it is because such areas cannot be farmed, it cannot be cut down, and therefore it's left untouched. And by default, it becomes a conserved area. Certain areas, community says we have to conserve this because it's in a watershed, and this is very, very critical. Many a times, the watershed is in our land, but the water sources are all down in their village area, and yet we continue to conserve that. And then comes this whole notion of the modern days perspective of conserving for conservation and whatnot. When we spoke with our communities as to why do we conserve then? Is it for the future generation? Is it for what purpose? Well, if it is conserved, the future generation will definitely enjoy it. But many of the communities actually say it's also an assertion of our self-determination. It's an assertion of what we can do on our land and how we can do what we have to do. And I think that's a very, very important perspective, because many a times we do not tend to look into the purpose of conservation, or we tend to think that they're conserving just for wildlife and for tree cover and whatnot. But I think we need to really, really look into, and this whole issue of asserting my community's independence or my community's ownership over the resource becomes very, very important and a great motivator for us to conserve this. And that is not only for the village or the tribe as a community or for the clan, but even for my kinship group, that this is my kinship group's land and we are conserving it and nobody can go into it and it needs to be respected. So those are the things now. But at the same time, things are changing. As I said yesterday, we cannot romanticize everything about the community. We cannot romanticize everything about conservation. Things are changing. There's a lot of pressure on these conservation areas. There's a lot of challenges. We have community conserved areas which a village can do together. As Pia had said, there are certain conservation areas where 3-4 villages get together also. But again, many of these conservation areas are in pockets. There are no functional corridors that are happening within them. So again, the challenge is how do we ensure that these pockets of conserved areas are connected, and how do we come up with mechanisms to do that? Another great challenge for the community is being able to document it scientifically and being able to have mechanisms and ways and means of doing that. That is a big challenge. They know the local names, they know the local usages, but many of these are not really, really documented. And every time the older generation goes away, this knowledge is just going away. And this because it's becoming more dangerous because our younger generation is getting away from the land. And the more we move away from the land, the lesser is a connect to the land and therefore our knowledge and also our language. So these are the challenges that are there. There are legal mechanisms, there are rules and different laws that are being emerging. But I think the biggest challenge is more than laws, more than policies, is how we as a community within ourselves, the intergenerational exchange of knowledge and the value systems that we need to ingrain about is how do we maintain that? I think that is the biggest challenge, and I'll just leave it open for right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Heron, if you'll give us your perspective as well on community conservation in Nagaland, because you've been able to work with communities across the entire landscape, very different cultures, very different traditions, very different perspectives really on conservation, and a lot of challenges and issues that you face. So how do you think bringing all these together, has it been a bit of a challenge for you to get them, all the community conserved areas together on a common platform? Also, there are lots of challenges within communities in terms of conservation and how they actually see it or perceive it as being important. So if you could shed a little light on that.
Thank you, Pia. My fellow panelists and friends, I'm honored to be here in your midst today. It's a great privilege for me to be sharing my stories with you. Nagaland, there's no land which doesn't belong to the people. Every village has their own jurisdiction, and they have absolute power over it. All the villages exercise their authority over their land, and the government has no say in how the people are managing their land and resources. I'm proud to say that our forefathers were all agriculturists. Everyone, every household had to go to do farming for their livelihoods. There was a time when everyone goes to the paddy field. No one was left alone to depend on others for their food. Everyone goes to the field to bring their own foodstuffs. That's how our forefathers had built up their relationship with nature, their surroundings. And they treat certain places as sacred to them. And there are places where people are not allowed to even step in. Or places where, like the water holes where animals or birds come to drink. People are not allowed to lay traps around that area because it's taboo. If you stop an animal from coming to drink that water, the curse will be on you. So everyone knows that they are prohibited to lay any traps around it. Like that, there are places where people are not allowed to venture in. So the respect was always there for nature. The big trees, big stones, the big rivers, all those. And our forefathers knew how to conserve. They knew nature like the palm of their hands. They knew when to cut down trees. They knew when to harvest, when to replenish. They were, I should say, they were scientists without degrees as far as nature is concerned. A time came when people started extracting, especially the big trees, the virgin forest, they started cutting down. Just recent history only. There was massive destruction of forests all over the state, wherever there were trees. So people, after, say, 20, 25 years after that destruction, people realized the need to conserve. In their own areas, people started that realization. Some people were aware of that, but there were people who were still hell-bent on cutting down more trees. So there were tussles, even among the villagers, the area people. Logging doesn't only cut down trees, but it spoils, damages the surroundings. So maybe 25, the first village to start this conservation officially had just celebrated the 25 years this beginning of this year, Konoma. So like that, people slowly started formally as CCA. So like that, here and there, people started organizing themselves into community conserved areas, but that name is not adopted as yet. But within their own village jurisdiction or areas combined, people started doing that. Some people started conserving the forest. Some people were concerned about the rivers. Some are around the water holes. Some around some trees that are going to be extinct. Some for the animals, some for birds. Different ways people started. So the organizations like the FES and the NEPET, Nagaland Empowerment of People Through Economic Development, they started educating the people that you have to do it. Not only that, doing yourself alone is not in isolation, is not going to help. So they started educating the people around. So it must have taken some 4 or 5 years to create that awareness, to have a common platform. It was in 2014 that they brought all of us together. Not all of us, some 14, 15 CCAs that were there at that time. They brought us together and they encouraged us to have a common platform so that we will have a common voice and to propagate further to other areas. It was in 2014, November, and we are going to celebrate the 10th year this year. We'll be celebrating it in November. So we started with 15 CCAs, but now our number is risen to 28, covering about 119 villages throughout the state. And I'm happy to say that I got a call last evening from one corner of the state that they want to become a member with us. So like that, here and there, we get the response from others. We have that now 28 CCAs, and then our aim, we have set a target that as far as possible, we will create a green cover throughout the state again. That is the target number one. The number two is to create a corridor for the animals that used to come across the state, right from Kaziranga into Intanki Forest, Intanki National Park, and then towards the Myanmar border. So after the formation, we have covered quite a good number of the CCA areas connecting this corridor. We are happy that our torch bearers like Konoma, then Lemsa Chenlok, where our Nuklu is here, and Cindy New like Wasinlo Thong, they are the pioneers and they led the way. And for them, we are here today. We are happy that more are on the pipeline, and we are hopeful that many more will join us and make a greener Nagaland. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one emerging theme from all the speakers, their comments, is that there's a diversity of perspectives and ways in which they manage their resources. And the strength is in the diversity. As Amba said, I mean, an area could be protected for mushrooms, it could be protected for mistletoe. There's so many community conserved areas, a whole network across Nagaland, and more people are joining them. There's such a rich amount of indigenous knowledge which the Lepcha communities have imbibed and have fostered over the years. And so much potential, for example, in Assam for conservation. But what is happening is that a lot of this is being homogenized. We talk about, governance frameworks actually recognizing community conserved areas, but this often happens in ways which are counterproductive, where ideas are imposed, where the conservation, the individuality is completely homogenized. And that is an important issue which one needs to address, because it's not simply about involving CCAs, bringing them under any particular law, under the Wildlife Protection Act as part of protected areas or as biodiversity heritage sites. There are lots of problems and issues which communities have been facing because of that. So I'll just address my next question to you, Mr. Herring, as well as to you, Amba. Yeah, as well as to you, Amba, in terms of how the whole imposition of community conserved, but community reserves under the Wildlife Protection Act has actually impacted Nagaland.
The community reserve has started recently. The villagers were happy to conserve their forest or their surroundings, their biodiversity. They were happy to do it for their own future. But in between, the forest department, since it is their duty, they also encourage the people, the villagers, to declare their forest as a community reserve. But the sad thing is, the impact that is going to be there was not explained to the villagers properly. And when we talk to the village chairman or responsible citizens of the village, they say that nothing was explained to us. We were asked to sign a paper, and they said they are happy with what they are doing, and then that is why they are giving giving out some money to encourage them to do it better. So that way they were just asked to put their signature on the paper, and then it was done like that. So it's really sad. We hope nothing serious will happen out of that, but you never know. Because it is the village councils, they are not aware of what is going to happen. The only thing that is they are doing it for their future generations. The conservation, they are doing it for the future. But when the forest department doesn't explain to them properly and then declare their forest as a community reserve, I hope the impact is not going to be to break down the efforts that the village council, the villagers had been doing it. Thank you.
So related to that, my question is for you, Amba. Do you think any kind of financial resources are required to support CCAs? Because what is happening is that whatever funding comes in is then being used to convert a lot of these CCAs into community reserves. So what are your thoughts on that? How do you ensure that it remains self-sustaining without the imposition of outside areas? Or do you think it's important for these to be formalized either through the Wildlife Protection Act or through some other governance frameworks?
Well, two things. First, I'm aware that we are beyond time, and I would like to cede a lot of my time to the audience if in case you have questions, because I would like to take that. But very quickly, yes, finances are really important, especially for capacity building and technology-led planning perspectives. But I mean, it'll take a lot more while to answer that question. So
Yeah, I think
I'll
we've
just
been
leave it at
given
that.
permission to go over a little bit because we
Okay.
started very late. So that's the reason. Mayalmit, if you could just tell us how you can get the whole issues which are affecting your areas, in terms of the dams. Has it made a difference in terms of the policy makers? Have they woken up? Are they listening to you? And how can this be done? Because you've been doing this for so many years now. So how does the message actually go across to policy makers?
Till now, it's like they haven't listened to the community demand. But like what we have done is like in my village, there's one lake. In that lake, the fish that is found is very rare. I believe it's not found anywhere in India. So with that movement also, now we have changed our strategy of how to make our the sacred grove or sacred forest to biodiversity heritage site. So recently, I think last year, that lake got declared as a biodiversity heritage site. So today morning in the group, because we've been working so hard, because just want to say that when the hydropower comes, these are the biodiversity heritage site. So you cannot touch, you cannot bring your tunnel here. So with that, today also they are sharing that there's one of the sacred mountain that was like by the Sikkim state government. They have sent for biodiversity heritage site. So these are the initiative that it's coming from the community, because it's not that the government will come and say that this is this has to be thing. It's a community effort. But problem with here is like we are a little confused, also a little disappointed also with such a like Sikkim, and as Zongo has become such a beautiful. A lot of people come there not to see the dams or to go to the powerhouse, but they love to come to see the natural beauties that we have. Like we have a lot of butterflies and birds and waterfall and the rivers. So I think when policies comes like FRA, now we are able to stop 2 hydropower project. The one is like because of FRA, because we have not given any clearance to the NSPC people. But like we have given this rejection long time back in 2018. But every year, so they'll come and push. Like again, there's some problem within the community, because we've been protesting. Resisting for so long. Again, like problem with the youth is like we're not able to focus in our career. Like for me, I could not complete my regular, though I had to do from distance. But likewise, so many youths are there, so they cannot concentrate in their career. So with this, the problem that is coming from the outside world. So but now the international financing agencies and the policy makers should be very, very serious about what the communities are saying and their perspective, because global warming and climate change is going to kill everybody, not only indigenous community. And disappointed that whether the outside policy makers are listening to us. One of the good example I wanted to share is I went to COP28 last year in Dubai. We could we could personally meet the Asian Development Banks, because Asian Development Bank is one of the agency who is funding Sikkim government. So I literally told them not to fund to Sikkim government in hydropower, because I give a very good example of what happened to the Stage 3 dam. It just, the cost, initial estimated cost of that project was 5,705 crore, but it accelerated to more than 14,000 crore. So it's all the fund that the loan that we are bringing up, and it is not even sustainable, So the project itself is not sustainable. Even the money is not sustainable. So I don't know why they want to push so much, So this is what really want to share. It's like every year we are having flash floods, landslides, and right now if you go to Sikkim, highway is closed now every now and then. These are the difficulties that not only the people, but even for the, for everybody, we are facing it. So it's high time that they should listen to the community voice.
So, Arnab, you were talking about the community forest resources. If you could just quickly tell us about how you actually use that to sort of stop the sanctuary, or whether you've been successful right now or it's in process.
Well, In Kakajana, there are lots of opportunities regarding what to say. It's a community association with the forest. There is traditional practices. If sanctuary is declared, then all traditional practices, all there are lots of sacred groups are there inside the forest. So all these beliefs and traditional practice at the same time will lose. So in that scenario, our idea is to stood against the sanctuary, not just raising voice against the conservation. It is not against the conservation. It is just for the conservation, but the method is different. Approach is different. If it is declared as CFR, then their community participation as well as these all traditional practice, traditional knowledge, medicinal, they use medicinal plants from the forest. So this will all retain. So that's why we are actually in favor of, this is under process. But the government agencies and the bureaucrats are not that supportive in this case.
So thank you very much. We were allowed a little leeway into lunchtime, but are there any questions, any pressing questions which people have for the panel?
My name is Tushar. I work on forest right issues with the forest right groups and campaigns. It's not a question, but it's a suggestion that many of you talked about Forest Rights Act and CFR rights. I think the potential of CFR rights, Community Forest Resource Right, as well as habitat rights under Forest Right Act, should be explored as a governance mechanism, because we have been doing studies to look at use of community forest resource rights, and we have seen, I come from Odisha, that many of this community managed forest area, which we know as community forest CFMs, now have been strengthened by recognition of CFR rights. And these CFR rights, that are now recognized in Odisha cover larger forest landscapes managed collectively by communities. That is one. Second, many community forest conserved areas threatened by extraction and mining, like Niyamgiri, if have heard the case. Culturally conserved areas like Niyamgiri also have their communities, and Gram Sabhas have been successfully asserted their right using FRA, CFR rights. So I think it is in that context, the governance question is very important, and we have also done studies which shows that, if CFR rights are properly implemented, then at least 177,000 villages, their community forest resource and habitat can be protected and can be designated as community forests. The implementation is very limited now, but there is a lot of potential. Also potential in the protected areas. We have seen and also documented that in BRT Tiger Reserve in the Soliga initiative, where the landscape has been claimed and recognized as CFRs, and now they are moving forward to claim to manage CFR areas in those Tiger Reserve. One very important aspect of the CFR right is that it is not something which has to be enforced by the state government. It has to be asserted by the Gram Sabhas and communities, which many communities across different states are now doing. So these new ideas, new strategies of governance using CFR rights and FRA are very important to consider, and seriously should be looked at in the context of CCS. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? We'll take them all together. If anybody else has a comment or a question?
I'm Archish from LGT Venture Philanthropy. We fund non-profits in the area of primarily nature-based solutions. So my question is, Amba, you mentioned about that the funding should be coming for the technology and the capacity building aspects. Wanted to understand where the funding can play a catalyst role, right, for a funder like us, right? So if we want to bring in that community perspective while, say, the government is planning for, say, a sustainable project, right? So where is the fund, what should a funder like us should fund, right? So where it can play a catalyst role.
Hi, thank you so much, and it was really nice to hear all of you. I have a question around the perspective of youth. When you had mentioned that, youth have to, and you yourself are an example, where you had to leave your studies midway and choose to fight for what you believe in. What could be solutions, according to you, where we involve and give more agency to youth? Because ultimately, look at it, they are the future custodians. And how can we make them more inclusive, participative, and also give them a purpose and drive to do what they believe in, given the indigenous communities and the kind of rich knowledge that can be preserved?
So the whole comment of yours of CFR rights, how important they are for community conserved areas, and that's an important issue because some of the states like Nagaland, they are sort of resistant to the idea of CFRs because they feel that all the lands anyway are privately owned or communally owned or owned by clan or a kale. And so that will actually make it a much more bureaucratic process. So there seems to be some resistance, and would either Mr. Herring or Mr. Amba choose to comment on that?
Whoever you decide. You're the moderator.
Okay, I'll pick you. Hmm? No, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I think across Northeast India, out of the 8 states, 6 states have actually given their opinion to the to the central government as to why the act is not enforceable, because of the fact that under the 6th schedule, the land and the forests already belong to the communities, unlike the rest of India where communities have to move into a forest or they're a forest community, have to be declared as a forest community. So in this state, they say we don't have forest communities. We have communities around whom there are forests and who owns it. So that is the main difference. How it's usable, how it can help each other in terms of that is a different debate to be explored. So I think that is the main thing that you're talking about. And since I'm holding the mic, I might as well address the other question that came to me. I'm sure everybody will have different perspectives in terms of how financing helps a lot in terms of what communities do and don't do. But see, for the communities to conserve what they're conserving, it's not the money, but it's the skills and capacities and other inputs that would really, really help them do better what they are doing. For example, with regards to research and documentation. A lot of researchers come, independent researchers, NGOs, but they just come, they do and they go. And the community usually the community are just knowledge providers, and they are guides, and they go around, and half the time they don't even see the reports that are written about them. There is no real documentation that is left back for the community to keep and maintain. For example, even under the Biodiversity Act and the biodiversity rules of every state, developing the people's biodiversity registers, till today, the trainings given to communities for maintaining a biodiversity register is almost nil. And yet communities are expected to, maintain a register and then to keep updating it and then do so many other things. Then the whole issue of planning. Again, communities have wonderful land use planning perspectives, resource use planning perspectives. But then how do we also bring in scientific know-how with regards to mapping the terrain according to whatever GIS technologies and other technologies that can be used. Or in terms of resource and knowledge management, there's so many databases that can be framed and kept with the communities. So, and most importantly is this whole issue of how do we build the capacities of these institutions. These institutions are having the knowledge and the skills and the aptitude and attitude to manage things as they once were insulated at that point in time, once upon a time. And that continues. But today they're no longer insulated. There are so many forces, including market forces that are coming in. There are forces from within the community that are pushing and pulling with regard to what to do with all these. So how do communities address this? And that's where I think a lot of capacity building is required, a lot of hand-holding is required, and no government, no project wants to spend money on capacities. They think project should, you should go have a project in an area where there's capacity. You should involve an NGO who has the capacity. But there is not such money for that. So I think as a philanthropist organization, sometimes capacity building, documentation, and communication, these skills are areas where a lot of funding and support is required. Thank you.
Mailmit, will you take the question?
Oh yeah, sorry. The youth.
Okay, I just want to add a little bit about what Ambassador said. Regarding the community research, like in my community, like I got an opportunity to work with International Accountability Project, and I'm one of the global advocacy team. We are 8 countries. Out of 8 countries, was like from India. So like what they taught me is a realization. What I also was sharing with them that a lot of documented in our community, like literature communities run by the outsider, like Europeans, Indians, and Americans, but we hardly have done from the community. But like what we have realized that we also can do our own community research, So I did community-led research, not only my individual, but community. And that way we can connect with the community and do research about our, the resources that we have, the drawback that we have, the advantage, what we can do. With all that, we collected all the data and survey through interview and with the client workshops and everything. At the end, that community-led research, whatever the data we have collected, now we are going to work on community-led development. So a lot of development policies are coming from the upper level, from the government, from the different agencies. That has made a conflict between the community and the agencies. Now it's so important that the policy makers should understand the development perspective should come from the community. So these are the things that we are working right now. So when I just want to other thing that I wanted to share is how to involve youth. So for me, nobody inspired to work for what I'm working right now. Nobody said anything. It just came, because I stayed in hostel. I'm very small, and I always miss my home and my family and my river and where I used to swim and all, So that way, when I realized that this hydropower is going to come, I think that I had got imagination that it's going to, all get destroyed. So how it came was I was writing one essay in the school saying that hydropower project is coming to your region, so what will be there? So while writing advantage and disadvantage, so a lot of disadvantage awakened me, So how to involve youth is it's very important for indigenous community youth to connect them with the land. That is very, very important. So when we started the movement became very, very strong because of the involvement of with the youth. Youth was in the hunger strike. Youth was going to mobilization. Youth was coming to Delhi to meet all that useless politicians. So all that. And capacity building is very, very important. Capacity building, we have to connect them. It's not just coming here and talking to the youth. That doesn't work. We have to involve in the workshop, and we have to connect them with the land. Once you can connect with the land, it automatically comes. So we do a lot of workshop with the women, with the children. Even we are going to the school-going children, talking to the, you write about, you start painting and all about your rivers and everything. So slowly we are capturing everything. Once you catch the youth, now we are working with many youths, more than 200-300 youths. So now they are writing their own stories about this sacred landscape. So we have a book in Northeast Water Talk. We are connected with that also. So we have stories. Our youth have written their own stories, and they are they have been published in such book. So these are the very important. And Leadership College, we have to give them a platform. Like I always, whenever the invitation comes like this, I always give it to the youth. They were saying that because they haven't been to the movement, but whenever I take them along also, in Marjuli we were almost 10 youth was there, so these are like, they get very inspired. We have to give them a platform. Otherwise, like only we taking that will not work. I think that's what I wanted to share, is like workshop, train them, make them realize their importance of the land and the stories, the oral stories, that the histories, everything so rich. We have so rich, especially Northeast, like it's like so diverse, and I'm so fascinated. Apart from that, I'm working with the shamans. Shamans also, they have so much knowledge, but it has not been documented. So once we can document it, and when we can translate it in English or in other language, it's like it's very important to learn. So this is what I really wanted to share.
So thank you very much. As Amba pointed out, we've gone way over time. But a critical feature to emerge from the discussion today is how important self-reliance is. When communities become self-reliant, when all the students, the youth become aware, become proud of their heritage and their traditional knowledge, that gives them the strength and the platform to actually be able to use whatever good frameworks are available, such as CFR rights or biodiversity heritage sites, to actually reclaim their rights over their land. So resilience is possibly one of the key measures, and it's not a question of global recognition or national recognition. It's about developing, because even conservation is so local, and so it's important for that to be developed, to be fostered. So thank you very much. We've had a wonderful panel. There's so many issues we would have liked to explore, but we thought it was good for everybody to give their perspectives and then to ask them a few key questions related to what they've experienced and what they face. So thank you very much. And you can continue the discussion over lunch.
Thank you, ma'am. So we have a small announcement. We have to just assemble near the statue of Dr. Ambedkar for a photographic session right after this group photo. And we have arranged some small gifts for. Request the Pia to please felicitate our guest panelists.
Very much.
And request Malmit to felicitate Pia.
There's a group photograph here. Come close.
Thank you.